And we are back with another Thought Leadership podcast. This is Abe Cohn with THC Leader Group, and we have Kris with us. Kris, how are you?
I'm well. Thanks for having me on.
Great, yeah. Thank you so much for being here. So tell us about yourself. Where do you work? What's kind of going on over at your company? What are you guys trying to do in the cannabis space? Let us get to know you a bit.
Sure. So I'm the president of 4Front Ventures. We are a management consulting and operations company based out of we're duly headquartered in Phoenix, Arizona, and Boston, Massachusetts, where I currently live and work. We work with medical cannabis and cannabis industry operators around the United States. We help them navigate the complex regulatory and licensing process to help them obtain licenses, particularly in competitive markets. And then we help them set up their operations primarily on retail with a suite of operational best practices, policies and procedures, operations protocols that we get them trained on, get them operating at a very professional level from day one. And we also have a company within our portfolio where we operate some licenses ourselves as well.
Wow. Okay. So there's definitely a lot of information there. One thing I think people have difficulty with is distinguishing medicinal cannabis programs from recreational. So, of course, one is accessible to people who have, specific medical needs, and they get the appropriate documentation and licensing, and then they can go to their doctor. But in states that are now kind of coming aboard as full recreational cannabis states, Massachusetts, as you mentioned, I think is one of them, certainly after November 8th. So what does that mean for dispensaries? Does it mean something to be a dispensary in a state that is only medically regimented, or how does all that work?
Well, it depends on the state, but I mean, by and large, there isn't a massive difference between dispensaries in medical states versus dispensaries in adult use states. The biggest differences really are going to be the regulatory agency that oversees them, some of the regulations around dosing, what kind of products can be sold, the tax rate for medical for medical marijuana is typically much lower than it is for adult use marijuana. The purchase limits are typically a bit higher for what people can purchase as a medical patient versus just as a recreational buyer. But by and large, the dispensaries operate on a fairly similar basis. There's a little bit more of a focus on the patient in the medical dispensaries versus the recreational dispensaries. But as we've seen in a lot of states, and I think Colorado primarily, but we're seeing this now in Washington, these two programs are being largely melded, with the medical being sold out of the same store as the adult use products. And so you may have people on staff that are very well trained to handle patients that the patients can go and see. They may even be in a separate counter as they are in Colorado. But by and large, they are both retail stores that sell cannabis to either medical consumers or adult use consumers.
Well, for states that are kind of making this transition from medical to full adult use, what is the dispensary application process like? So for example, if you were in California and you were able a year ago to apply for a license for a dispensary, but of course only for a medical regime, because until recently it wasn't for adult use, and now we're waiting till the full adult use program kind of gets rolled out. Do you find that we're in some kind of strange middle ground for some new entrepreneur that wants to go, who's in California, he wants to open up a dispensary? Which route is there a distinction between the routes of medical versus adult use, or how do those things kind of blend together?
Well, yeah, there is a difference. And, if you were a brand new entrepreneur and just wanted to go open an adult use facility in California, for example, you wouldn't be able to do it for a handful of reasons. I mean, number one, the adult use regulations aren't going to go into effect until 2018, so they got to spend the next year putting the program in place. But my understanding in California is it's going to be similar to the other states that just passed adult use laws, which is that the first wave of applications and licenses are going to go to the existing licensed medical businesses. So somebody who just wants to open a new business in California or or same thing in Nevada, Maine, or Massachusetts, will not be allowed to do so unless they already have a license for a medical business. Those businesses will transition first. And then after a designated amount of time, usually about a year after that first round of licensing, they'll start opening it up to new applicants and new applications. So there's a bit of a buffer period here in all these states, since they are making that transition from medical to adult use, where the existing medical license holders will be able to use their existing infrastructure to transition to adult use, to sort of slow roll out the program before it gets opened up to a broader free market.
That is interesting. So entrepreneurs who are looking to just kind of get into the game now really don't have much available to them until all of the existing medical dispensaries are already kind of grandfathered into the new adult use regime. Is that right?
By and large, that is correct. In Maine, it's a little bit more complicated, but by and large, that's right. California, you got to understand, when you ask about California specifically, they've had medical marijuana in place since 1996 with the passage of Prop 215, but they never actually had state licensing like we see in most other states. So the businesses have been operating in a legal gray area. Other than businesses in places like Oakland and San Francisco and West Hollywood and a handful of other towns and municipalities that have issued licensing in California where you're able to operate with a municipal license, there hasn't been state licensing. That just passed about a year ago, and that state licensing goes into effect in 2017. So what we're going to see in California is this coming year in 2017, all of these businesses are first going to be applying for their medical licenses. And then in 2018, those businesses that have been medically licensed will be allowed to then apply for adult use licenses. And the adult use initiative was actually, because it was written shortly after MRSA, which is the medical marijuana licensing bill, was passed. The licensing scheme under adult use in California is going to largely mirror the same type of licensing that is going to exist under medical. So there's a two-phase process that's happening in California with licensing medical this year and then licensing adult use next year. In states like Massachusetts, Maine, to a lesser degree, and Nevada, you're going to be dealing with businesses that are already licensed, medical businesses that are already licensed, that will have the first opportunity to transition before anybody else comes into the market.
And, many of these states, certainly for medical programs, we're based out of Ohio. There are going to be a certain number of licenses that they're actually going to issue to entrepreneurs. Is that the same with these full adult use licenses as well? Or, so if state X says we're only going to issue 25 adult use licenses, are the people who are transitioning from a medical program into the full adult use license, do those get encompassed by that 25 cap limit, or how do you imagine that working?
Well, if you're talking about Ohio specifically, they're just going to be licensing the medical businesses first. So you're starting out on an even playing field. But you don't have existing businesses that are being grandfathered in. Everybody gets to apply at the same time, and they're going to grant those licenses. As far as if you're thinking about down the road, should Ohio legalize for adult use? How would that work? We just don't know at this point. It depends on what the ultimate adult use law looks like. What we have seen in virtually every state that has passed adult use that did have medical first, which is, I think, every state that's passed adult use has already had medical. They have given preference to those existing license holders. But as far as what the specifics would look like in Ohio, it's far too early to say. That we don't have any kind of draft legislation or draft initiative language that would govern this, so it's just too early.
Okay, wow, that's interesting. One of the main concerns entrepreneurs have, and of course certainly investors have, is that cannabis under Schedule 1 of the Controlled Substance Act is still federally illegal. So, what kind of risks are people taking when they apply for these dispensaries, knowing that it's still federally illegal?
Well, that's a great question. It is federally illegal, and there is no, there's not much at the federal level that allows these businesses to exist. But there are a couple of protections that these businesses have. Number one is something we call the Cole Memo,
right.
Which is essentially a directive from the Attorney General to the Department of Justice, or within the Department of Justice to the U.S. attorneys around the United States that basically says it's not a good use of prosecutorial resources or prosecutorial discretion to go after businesses as long as they are compliant with state law and abiding by, and they've got a list of about 8 different provisions that they want the business to abide by.
Right.
We also have an amendment to the.
Well, wait, if I could just ask you a question about that, I'm sorry. These the issue with these memos, of course, is that their power and influence is only as important and impactful as the administration who has drafted and is sustaining them. So now that we're
yes, I was going to get to that.
Yeah, okay. People
that's absolutely right.
People are worried about a Trump presidency. I'm wondering what that means for these memos and how we should think about their impact given the transition from Obama to a Trump administration.
Well, it's a great question. So, as I mentioned, there are currently 2 things that are providing legal protection to these businesses. Number 1 is the Cole memo, and we'll come back to that in just a second. Number 2 is the Farr-Rohrabacher amendment to the Criminal Justice Appropriations Bill.
Okay.
And that's something that needs to be reauthorized every year. But it has been for the last 4 years under increasingly Republican Congresses. So we're hopeful that will continue to be reauthorized. So the CJS Appropriations Amendment is actually this is actually a matter of law, and that prevents the Justice Department from spending any money enforcing federal marijuana laws against state legal medical marijuana businesses, not adult use businesses, just medical marijuana businesses. There is another amendment that would provide the same protections to adult use businesses that failed very narrowly last year that we're hopeful will pass this year. And those may pass regardless of who's in power of the administration. Because this is an amendment to a very large spending bill, it's highly unlikely that the spending bill itself would be vetoed just because of this small provision. So there's still a good chance we get those passed, and those will, if so, those could provide some substantial legal protection to these businesses, particularly if we can get the second one passed that we weren't able to last year.
I see.
As far as the Cole memo goes, you're absolutely right. The Cole memo was a directive issued by Attorney General Holder, upheld by current Attorney General Loretta Lynch. There is no guarantee that incoming Attorney General Jeff Sessions is going to uphold that memo. He could, he could just simply rescind the memo at any moment. And there no longer is a directive to these U.S. attorneys not to interfere with these businesses. Also worth knowing that when the new administration comes in, or worth mentioning it, when the new administration comes in, they're going to replace virtually all of the U.S. attorneys across the country. So you could be facing a situation, and that happens when any new administration takes office, particularly when you change political parties.
Right.
What that means is we could be looking at a situation where, we no longer have a directive from the Department of Justice to their U.S. attorneys not to interfere in these businesses, and you may have new U.S. attorneys who are more conservative or bigger drug warriors who want to crack down even further. So, there is a real risk to these businesses with the new administration. Our hope is that they will uphold the Cole memo and continue to be hands off and treat this as a states' rights issue. President-elect Trump, when asked about this on the campaign trail on multiple occasions, said he's a states' rights guy and he's going to allow the states to continue to follow through with their laws without federal interference. He's even said he would stop his attorney general from interfering. So we have to hope that the president-elect was telling the truth,
right.
and is going to follow through on his campaign promises. If not, things could get really dicey here for some of these businesses.
So does that concern? I mean, of course, your business. You don't know what the federal government is going to do, how these things are going to play out. But, in a certain way, you're directing these businesses, navigating them through these alligator-filled waters of regulatory measures. And at the end of this river, we really don't know what awaits us. Does that make you nervous as a consultant who's kind of helping and certainly acting as the guide for these businesses? How are you feeling about it? What's your sense of it? Are you nervous about it?
Yeah, absolutely nervous. I think you have to be. If you're in this business and you're looking at what's upcoming here, you have to be nervous about what the new administration may or may not do. It would be very easy for this new administration to roll back a substantial amount of the progress that we've made over the last particularly 4 years, but really 8 years. And it wouldn't take a whole lot for them to do it. They could go out and start raiding businesses if they wanted to. Particularly the adult use businesses. You could be looking at people who have been in complete compliance with state law. All of a sudden facing down 20-year mandatory minimum sentences in federal prison. And the reality is, if the Justice Department decides to go after someone and someone's facing charges in federal court, they're going to lose. Right. I mean, that's just how this works. You don't win in federal court. The federal court system is absolutely stacked against defendants and in favor of the federal government and federal prosecutors. Right. So you could be looking at something as drastic as multiple business owners across the United States facing long prison sentences. But my guess is they would probably do it more, or they would probably be a little more. Or a little less dramatic, I should say. Okay. And all they would really need to do is send out letters. And this wouldn't take very much, right? You've got all these businesses are now licensed with their states. It would take a couple of low-level staffers doing a month or two worth of research to get the names and addresses of most of the business owners in the United States, because they're on zoning permits, they're on state licenses and state permits, they're in articles, they have corporate commission filings that can be found. Like, it would take a fairly insignificant amount of research to get these names and addresses, at least for a majority of the businesses. And all they would need to do is send a letter to the business owners saying you are in violation of the Federal Controlled Substances Act and have 90 days to shut down before we raid your business, and send a similar letter to their landlords saying your tenant's in violation of the Controlled Substances Act. You have 90 days to evict them, or we're going to seize your property using civil asset forfeiture. And that would probably shut down the majority of the businesses in the country. Without ever arresting anybody, without ever putting a boot on the ground. They could basically force most of these businesses out just by sending out letters. So the Justice Department has a tremendous amount of power and a lot of leeway in how they would go about this, should they decide that enforcing federal marijuana laws against state legal businesses is a priority in this new administration and the new Justice Department.
I mean, it's certainly a daunting proposition, especially considering, even if we were to forego the likelihood that any of these business owners would face jail time or criminal prosecution, the amount of money and time that's been invested to get these businesses off the ground is just really colossal. So it's a daunting thought that somehow Jeff Sessions and his new staff would just kind of steamroll through the entire industry on a national level. Hopefully it doesn't come to that, right?
That's the idea. Well, and I will say that we have a real opportunity right now. I mean, I don't want folks to get to be too sort of downtrodden about this or depressed that this is going to actually happen. We don't know right now. We don't know what's going to happen. The administration has not said that they're going to crack down, so I don't think that we should assume that they will. But I also don't think we should assume that they won't. There's been, I've certainly heard a lot of folks in the industry saying, well, Trump promised he wouldn't do it, and he said he's a states' rights guy, and he's got too many other priorities. Yeah. And all those things are true, and all those are reasons why they might not crack down. But we just walked through the other reasons of why they might crack down. Right. And how they might crack down easily. And how they might crack down, right. Exactly. Yeah. So, what we have to do right now is take this threat, very seriously, and work. And work with try and work with the administration to make sure it doesn't happen. There's going to be efforts by all of the major marijuana and drug policy reform organizations over the next few months. We're going to need massive support from the industry. I mean, I really think we need to raise somewhere in the range of $4 to $5 million over the course of the next couple months, primarily from folks in the industry who have a financial interest in making sure that this doesn't all get shut down. Yeah. And and we need to have the right lobbyists in Washington D.C. We need to be bringing patients to D.C. to meet with Sessions and meet with their senators to talk about why it's so important that they have access to their medicine. We need to have a multi-front effort to try and convince the incoming administration not to crack down. And so I don't think that we should be taking the position as an industry or as a movement today that we need to fight this administration and take an adversarial approach. Take an adversarial approach right now. Yeah. Instead we should be taking the approach that this administration could potentially do the right thing, and we need to pressure them to do the right thing. And if so, then we're not going to need to fight, right? Then we're going to be able to continue to move on and work with them. So I think everybody needs to band together. We need to contact our members of Congress. We need to contact our senators. We need to contact the administration. If there's anybody in the industry that has connections to the president-elect or people in his inner circle through their business connections or their political connections, they need to be getting that message to them now. We simply cannot sit back and hope that the administration is going to do the right thing. We also can't sit back and assume the administration is going to do the wrong thing. We need to use every tool that we have available to us to pressure them to do the right thing.
Well, the Trump administration is not, I believe, going to enter office for about another 6 weeks or so something like that. At what so many entrepreneurs kind of want to sit and wait it out until they can kind of get a better sense of where the administration is heading on this issue. So, at what point do you think it would be safe, or what sort of indicators do we need to see from the administration before entrepreneurs can feel comfortable again with really getting involved in the dispensary business? At what point do they say, okay, the risk is low enough for me to put in all this money and time and resources? How should people think about that on a very actionable way?
Well, I think that we need another statement from the president-elect saying he's going to uphold his campaign promises, and I think we need a statement from the attorney general saying that they're going to uphold the Cole memo. I think that's really it. I think we need them to clarify what their position is, and then I think we need to hold them accountable to follow through on that once they take office.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's move on to something a little more pleasant, because this has gotten me a little depressed. I hope. But the reason, of course, why everyone wants to get into this business, beyond some of the libertarian thoughts that say government should stay out of private business, and the idealists who think that cannabis is just a wonderful thing, but entrepreneurs are in this game to make money. I know you've had a lot of experience opening up different dispensaries for different companies around the country. What are you seeing from these dispensaries? Are they making a lot of money? Is it truly the green rush that people want it to be? How do you view all of that?
I don't think it's the green rush that people want it to be. These businesses, some of them make money. Some of them do quite well. A lot of folks, just get by, do well, but it's not, people aren't becoming millionaires running dispensaries by and large. Maybe the absolutely most successful are getting close to that, but by and large, these are small businesses, and there aren't major national corporations in the space right now that are bringing in billions of dollars. That just doesn't exist in the space yet. So I think people need to recognize this for what it is. I think the potential for folks to make money is massive. And our philosophy has always been, if you approach this the right way, if you're smart about how you go about it, if you're very professional, if you keep the long game in mind, in the long run, you're going to do extremely well. I think if folks are trying to cut corners and chase every dollar right away, they're much more likely to crash and burn and not be around in a couple of years. So it's it is an emerging industry. It has risks, substantial risks, or it comes with substantial risks. But the opportunities are there to make money. Just asking, like, are folks making money in running dispensaries or running these businesses? It varies dramatically from state to state. So in some states that have a limited number of licenses and an expansive list of qualifying conditions for patients, those businesses are doing well. In other states, look at a state like New York, for example, where you would think, a state of was it New York's almost 20 million people, I believe, that has
concentrations of wealth also.
Massive concentrations of wealth, tons of people, only 5 licenses for the entire state, vertically integrated licenses, right? Meaning that they're, they grow, produce, and dispense, and each one gets 4 stores for the dispensary. You would think that those would be, the most profitable businesses in the country.
Yeah.
And yet, because the qualifying condition list is so restrictive and the hoops that someone has to jump through to become a patient are so challenging, these businesses are dying. Like, they're getting absolutely killed financially. Right? They're not only they're not making any money. I mean, they're just bleeding money and losing it left and right. So it varies. It depends on the state. There are some businesses in California and Colorado, in Massachusetts and Arizona that are doing very, very well. And there are businesses in places like Illinois and New York and Minnesota that are really struggling because of a lack of a patient base and essentially a customer base. So it varies. This is people like to talk about this as if it's a $50 billion industry.
Right.
It's not. It's $51 billion industries, and not and that's an oversimplification. But this is a state by state business, right? You can't move product across state line. You can't take your business and cross state lines unless you want to set up an entirely new business in a new state. The regulatory structures from state to state vary dramatically. And so it's impossible to give an answer, to a question like, do dispensaries make money or do these businesses make money?
Right.
You really have to look at it on a market by market basis because the dynamics in each market are so radically different.
Right. I suppose what's kind of both simultaneously simplistic and yet kind of exciting about that question is that given this backdrop of risk and uncertainty, there's kind of something romantic about the state rates going against a federal government that doesn't seem to want to encourage an individual autonomy and liberty, and people think that they feel like they're out west in the 1800s and they're striking. It's a business like any other business, and people would be remiss to assume that just because it is risky and exciting, that doesn't mean they're going to be a millionaire 6 months after opening up their shop. So that's
right. And much like the gold rush, people talk about this as the green rush. Most people in the gold rush went broke.
Yeah.
Most people in the gold rush did not make money.
Right. You hear about the success stories and the victories, but you don't hear about the people who lost everything. So
that's right. And there's going to be a lot of that in this industry as well. This is not a license to print money. This is not easy. There are more hoops to jump through in this industry than any other probably in the United States right now, because it's federally illegal and because of the heavily regulated nature of the state regulatory programs. So this is not easy. And I think folks who think that this is just a way for them to get in and make a bunch of money, are often very wind up being very disappointed. Again, I think if folks come into this recognizing that you're starting a small business, there's a relatively long runway in this, and if we do it right and approach it in a way that's very professional and make sure that we don't cut corners and abide by our state regulations, that in the long run there's a lot of money to be made here. But it is not a get rich quick scheme by any means. It's a really hard industry. It's really challenging, and for folks who are looking for a quick buck, this is probably not the place to do it.
Wow, well, that is both wonderful and frankly rather sobering advice. So I think we will all gain from that. How can people connect with you, learn more about what you guys are doing, listen to your podcast? How do people get in touch with you?
Sure. Well, they can check us out at 4frontventures.com. It's the numeral 4, then frontventures.com. And you can check out the website. You can check out some of what we're working on around the country. I would definitely recommend also checking out the Marijuana Today podcast.
Okay.
It's not my podcast. I'm one of the regular guests. I'm on it every 3 or 4 weeks or so. But it's I would say as far as a weekly podcast where you can get your news of the week, I think it's probably the best out there.
Okay.
It's run very much like a sort of like your Sunday morning roundtable talk shows, with there's a rotating panel of experts, of which I'm one of them, that we discuss the previous week's news in marijuana politics and business. So a great place to keep up to date once a week on the most pertinent issues, and with analysis from experts in the field. I recommend checking that out. Check out our website, again, 4frontventures.com, and happy to entertain any questions folks may have about how to get involved in the industry.
Fantastic. Well, listen, this was a real pleasure. I certainly learned a lot. I'm sure all of our audience will as well. Look, thanks so much for speaking with us. I would love to have you on in the near future.
Absolutely. I appreciate you having me on, and happy to do it anytime.
Great. Thanks, Kris.
You're welcome.
Bye.